Hello everybody, welcome to my weekly Facebook Live. And what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is something that's a lot of fun, and that is talking about daydreaming and doodling and what they can actually be used for to improve our lives. And of course that might seem really strange because I don't know about you, but I know when I went to school, if we were sort of caught daydreaming, we were told off by the teacher. And if we were doodling, we were also told off. I think the idea being that it meant we weren't listening either with those. And if we were daydreaming, we were perhaps being lazy, all these sort of negative connotations to daydreaming and doodling. So as we got older, a lot of us, I think, have actually stopped or have reduced the amount that we do it. And that can actually be a real disadvantage. It's a real shame because there's lots of benefits in daydreaming. So I'm giving you permission right now, and in doodling. So I'll start by telling you or just explaining, hello, what I think my definition, so to speak, of daydreaming and doodling are, so that you've got more of a sense of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about them. So daydreaming is, of course, oh, hello, Peter. Thanks for joining. I didn't realize it was you. So daydreaming is where we look as though we aren't focused. And in fact, we actually aren't really. So we can be looking off into the distance. So I can sort of be looking like this to the side and, really intensely focusing and looking as though I'm sort of staring away at nothing. And often I'm really, we're quite still when we're doing that. And you've probably done it before or seen other people do it where if you're actually, called, your name's called or you're spoken to, we can actually be almost in a trance. It is, in a way, like a trance. And we can actually be, a person might actually say to us, hey, Helen, in my case, are you listening? And I can be an absolute world away. And that's what it is we are taken somewhere away from the present moment. So we're focusing in terms of our creativity. We've got something happening that we're thinking about, but it's not under our control. We're not conscious about it, and in that respect, it's like a trance. And it's very different in that respect, from doodling, which tends to be more. We're actually thinking about something when we're doodling, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So. Of course, I'm sure you have been found yourself daydreaming at times. Of course, there's times when we don't want to be daydreaming. So when we're in the middle of talking with somebody one-on-one and we don't want to be staring off to the distance. If you're in a larger group and you're not the focus of attention at that time, it mightn't be so much of a problem. Also, of course, we don't want to be daydreaming when we're operating machinery or driving or anything like that. And of course, daydreaming can be a few minutes. It can actually be quite a few minutes for some people. And I think some people will do it more frequently than others. And as I said before, for a lot of us growing up, it was discouraged. So it's actually a habit that we probably have got out of. So that's daydreaming. In contrast, doodling is the drawing on a piece of paper or something. And the difference is, as I said, is that this is a bit more purposeful. Having said that, we're actually thinking, we're not off, we're usually listening to something. So if I give you an example of when I tend to doodle, and that is when I'm on the phone. And I've actually only really realized this in recent years, that quite often especially if I'm by myself and I'm on the phone, I'll either have the phone in one ear or I'll be talking on hands-free, with earplugs or something. And then in my other hand, I'm actually doodling. And so having said that, I am thinking about what it is that I'm drawing, but I'm actually listening at the same time. So I'm still present. And as I said, that's the difference with the daydreaming, where we're usually not in the present moment at all when we're daydreaming. And and of course, it can be all drawing all sorts of shapes or pictures. I mean, they can be coherent, they can be easily recognizable. If there's something that you want to be drawing, and I've just remembered, I'm going to reach over and get my doodle that I've been doing earlier today. And just bear with me for 1 second. I forgot to get that ready when I was getting ready for the video. So I'll just give you an example of mine. And it doesn't matter which way up it is. It can be, obviously, that's part of the beauty. It doesn't really matter. And that's a whole page. Sometimes I'll just do a doodle that might be just in one corner. And I find that if I take notes, if I have to write, for instance, a phone number, say, you know, somebody's giving me their number or something, what I find if I'm chatting afterwards is that I've doodled around that number. I can still read it, but I've drawn pretty flowers around it, or I've boxed it, or something like that, which I think is really fascinating. It's actually great if you examine and think about your doodles, analyze them to some extent. And there are people who actually say that there's some sort of some unconscious reasons or meanings to the doodles that we actually do. I'm not so certain of what that part of it is, but I do know that it's actually also something really of benefit. So if I go back though to daydreaming, and in fact a lot of the benefits for both do cross over to each other. So the benefits with the daydreaming is that it can actually be, even though we're not conscious of, we're not consciously doing it, it can be a good transition from the end of one task to the beginning of another. I've sometimes noticed that it's almost as if we give our prefrontal cortex, the conscious sort of thinking part, a bit of a rest, and our unconscious and some would say our right brain, meaning our creative aspects of our brain, our imagination, giving it free rein for a short amount of time. And this can help, as I said, with this transition between tasks. And with daydreaming and with doodling also, they both can actually help with, great topic, thank you. Are you going to be doing more along these lines, Peter? I can if you want me to. The reason I love talking about this, and I think you know my niche is around productivity, and what I wanted to, the point I wanted to make is that these doing things like daydreaming and doodling can actually improve our productivity by, as I've said already, reducing our stress, and also by helping our concentration. And that's particularly with doodling, and I'll mention a really interesting study about that in just a moment. So please, Peter, and anybody else who's watching either live or after, when it's after the live has finished, if you're watching the replay, please do suggest what topics you'd like me to go through. I just think that these sorts of things are fascinating, and the fact that we, as I said before, we were condemned when we were kids, or even if you did it as an adult and you're in mixed company of daydreaming and doodling, but actually, you know, it has a purpose and can help us. So as I said, reducing stress, being a good transition with daydreaming between tasks. Also, because we're using our imagination, that means with daydreaming, it means that we are actually opening our mind up in a creative way, and also as a way of problem solving. It's not that we're actually contemplating a problem at that moment with the daydreaming, because we're usually often if it was me, I could be another time and place. Could be, as they say, a million miles away. But the actual action of doing it, the mere act of doing that, can help open up different areas of our brain and allow more problem solving to happen on a general level, which is great. And also, it's just the more that we daydream, the more that we do increase our creativity in so many different ways. When I think of us with businesses and how innovative we need to be, anything that's going to stimulate our creativity, our opening up our minds to different ways of doing things, whether it's a problem or whether it's just that we want to be innovative, is great. I think the likes of Richard Branson encourage daydreaming at work. I think I've heard that too. Of course, he's a smart cookie. He probably daydreams a lot himself, and that's probably where he got his idea for Virgin and space travel and who knows what. But yeah. it, look, which is it's really quite funny because, as I said, as kids and even as adults, in most of our workplaces, if we were to daydream, we'd be told off. You're lazy. What are you doing? You're just sitting there doing nothing. You're wasting time. When in fact we may not be. Now, having said that, the caveat with both of these is that there needs to be some degree of boundary. If we were only daydreaming or only doodling all day, then of course we wouldn't get a lot done. But there's probably the issue that most of us as adults don't do it enough rather than we do it too much. But just be aware of, obviously, when it's appropriate and when it's not. That, hats off to people like, obviously, we talk about innovation. I mean, Richard Branson's just one of the best in terms of that. So there's some of the benefits I'd mentioned just before then of daydreaming. So now on to the benefits of doodling. So doodling, as I said, is a little bit different because we're usually thinking about something and the thing is that, as I said, daydreaming, we can be a million miles away. With doodling, we actually can hear better and concentrate better on something that might be said to us. And an example that shows evidence of this is a study that was done in England where there were two groups of people that both had to listen to a voicemail message on a phone. And it went on for about 2.5 minutes, but it was very, very monotone, very boring. And the person in the voicemail was talking about different things, and that included a party and who he wanted to invite to the party. But as I said, it was very monotone, very boring. Now, for a lot of us, if that was the case, we'd probably start daydreaming. Anyway, as I said, the person talking was mentioning a number of names of people that he wanted to invite to a party that was coming up. After the voicemail, both groups, what I meant to say was one of the groups was, their object was to remember as many names as possible after listening to the voicemail. But while they were listening to it, both groups were actually asked to write down the names that they remember, to write as they were listening. Now, one of the groups, that's all they were asked to do. The other group was asked in between to actually doodle. And obviously how they did it exactly was up to them. So they might write a name, then they might doodle, then when another name comes, they might, or just doodling and listening, but also writing down the names. They were asked, both groups were asked specifically to do that. So as I said, at the end of the voicemail, the pieces of paper were taken away and both groups were then asked to remember those names. So they didn't know they had to remember the names. They were just asked to write them during the voicemail. Now, the group that actually was asked to doodle as well as write down the names had a 29% increase or improvement in their memory of the names they were asked to remember than the group that weren't asked to doodle, that were only asked to write down the names as they were listening. Now that's nearly a third better for the group that were doodling. And that's amazing. That's actually a lot. So we can actually concentrate better and remember more when we're listening to something if we're doodling at the same time, which might sound absurd. It's not the case if we were daydreaming. That's where the big difference is. But when we are doodling, and I'm quite proud of myself that I'm doodling when I'm on the phone and I've got to remember things. And I do think that I am still listening to the person. I'm still talking. I'm hearing what they're saying. That's the person on the other end of the phone doesn't know that I'm doodling, but it actually helps me. And there's some evidence for it. So it's amazing. Now, the thinking with that is that when we doodle, first of all, we reduce stress, just as I said before about daydreaming. And then also we're using different parts of our brain that can help when we're doodling, that can help our memory more than if we aren't doodling. So I think it's just really, really, really fascinating. The other thing with doodling is that it can open up as well with daydreaming our creativity and our problem solving. So much so that there are people that suggest that if you have a problem a way that you can think about it is to actually doodle. So yes, it can be mind mapping, but that's obviously a lot more formalized and systematic. What I'm talking about is just, doing whatever, as I showed you before. There's no rhyme or reason to what I've drawn here, and I'm not putting a lot of thought into it. Having said that, I actually YouTubed about doodling, and I couldn't believe there were videos on how to doodle. It's like, oh, okay, you've actually got to do it. But to me personally, the act of doodling in a free-form way, I'm sure it must activate the part of our brain that means we don't have to fit into it. And hi, Enzo, I think that's you. Yes, hello, welcome. The act of doodling, when it's in a free-form way, I think means that we don't have to censor ourselves. If we had to learn, inverted commas, how to doodle, I think my perfectionist, or I'd like to think my recovering perfectionist, but whichever, would think, oh, I've got to do it straight. And, it's a bit like then wanting to, trying to do a drawing or a painting, and you hesitate because you think, oh, it won't be good enough, and how do I start? And it won't, it won't be right. So I think the beauty of doodling is actually, as I said, just being so freeform about it. So the fact that there are YouTube videos and probably books and whatever else on how to doodle is funny. But one of the YouTube videos did say that there were certain basic shapes. So it was interesting. I noticed that some of them were circles, and I intuitively have drawn those, and also a house, which I tend to actually do a lot of. So I don't know if that has some psychological implication or something. I don't know. And I tend to do a mixture of the lines and then, different, well, that's a heart one, obviously, but different shapes. So I think it's just fascinating. So if you have a problem that you're not sure, or you just you feel like you want to contemplate about, then maybe you can do that and doodle at the same time. Now, I don't know that it means that you're actually going to have the answer. Like if I was to look at that, I don't know if I'd have the answer as such. I don't know how to interpret the symbols, a bit like I'm not an expert on interpreting dreams. But the mere fact of doodling, as I said, uses different parts of our brains that can facilitate the problem-solving aspects. So I just think that it's really, really interesting. I really encourage you, if you can, to take the time to doodle. I give you permission. I give you to give yourself permission to do it. Don't feel that it's only for kids and that it's a waste of time and all that sort of thing. It's actually a really valuable tool that we have. And I was talking before about creativity, and what comes with that also is an improvement in our intuition. That it opens up, as I was mentioning before, our right brain, which is the home of creativity, the home of intuition, and really analysis on a deep level, and also in a spatial way. Spatial meaning how we use space, and that's in a great example of space, a spatial way of drawing on paper. What I've done there with these doodles. So I also give you permission to be daydreaming. As I said, of course, it can't be done all the time, and in some circumstances, it's not recommended. But having said that, you could. Now, daydreaming we tend to do, we don't even consciously realize we're doing it until we might sort of go like this and think, oh, wow, I was really, really daydreaming there. Or as I said before, someone can say, hey, where are you? And sort of knock us out of our daydream. There are certainly some psychologists who think that there's benefit in actually daydreaming on purpose. So actually sitting down or wherever you are and just taking a few minutes and just letting your imagination wander. And I suppose it's a form of meditation. But you're not wanting to focus only on one thing and in a purposeful way. You want to actually let your mind wander. But I think the key with that would be to be still and to just allow that space for the daydreaming to come through. So I leave you with that. I hope that that stimulates your imagination. I hope it interests you enough that you actually consider more about the way that you are currently daydreaming, how often you're doing it, where you are when you do it, maybe what you're daydreaming about. And you can consider whether you want to actually try and purposely make time to daydream. And then also the value of doodling. And you know what? For me personally, I'd prefer to doodle than do some of the adult colouring books. They can be great, but I can sometimes feel like I've got to, only go between the lines. And again, the perfectionist that comes out. When it's a blank page, it can be anything. And it doesn't have to be, a proper shape. There's no right or wrong with doodling. And that's what I like. No judgment, no shame, with what the end result might be. And you can actually, maybe if you doodle frequently, you can actually have a think about what might be some common themes and whether you think they mean anything or not. As I said, the beauty, the gift in it is actually the process itself and just giving into that. So I would love to hear, I've got to say I doodle all the time. Excellent. Good to hear it's okay. Exactly, Enzo. I'm really pleased that I've been able to, take away any guilt that you've had with it. I did mention before, of course, if you were only to doodle all day, that mightn't be the best thing. And so it might seem to be counterintuitive with productivity. This idea that we've got to focus, and I talk myself about focus. But it's interesting. I think I definitely talk about balance. And there's the beauty of the balance between the focus productivity when it's needed, but also the free form, which is more the right brain, that happens when we allow ourselves at other times to daydream, doodle, whatever those activities might be. So I would love to hear how you go. If you want to, you're welcome to comment below any more questions you've got about this or any topics related that you want me to cover, any other experiences you've got also for those of you who are watching the replay. I think that's a great cause that I can be starting, the Daydreaming and Doodling Club or something like that. So here's to all of us who enjoy doing it. So I will leave you with that. Wish you a great night and see you next time. Bye.